Discover 3 sinister caving experiences that reveal terrifying secrets of the haunted depths. Sarah's late-night shift at the convenience store should have felt familiar, mundane, even boring. Yet, perched on the edge of a small Midwestern town's darkest folklore, it was anything but. They whispered of the caves below the store, rumors of malevolent spirits and shadowy figures. Crooked smiles adorned the faces of the locals who had spun the tales of disappearances, warning of the dangers that lurked beneath their quaint streets. She could almost hear the echoes of the lost souls crying for help from deep within the earth. You ever heard those stories about the caves? One of her neighbors had asked her just a month ago. The words clung to her like a chill, making her shudder. Tonight, under the flickering fluorescent lights, those stories felt more real than ever. The atmosphere thickened steadily as the clock struck 11. The store had grown eerily quiet, save for the occasional kettle-like whistle of a tired driver seeking caffeine. But as another customer stepped up to the counter, a man with a furtive gaze who lingered too long, her heart skipped. He watched her, unblinking. Sarah broke eye contact, but the unease settled in her gut. She shifted, trying to focus on ringing up sodas for the couple behind him, but their hushed whispers echoed like distant thunder. With each beep of the register, a shadow stretched further and deeper, reaching out from the entrance to the cave. She could almost feel beneath her feet. The fluorescent lights flickered, and for a split second, she thought she saw something move behind the shelves. A cold sweat beaded on her back. The whispers rose dangerously, almost mocking her presence. Something was wrong. Her instincts screamed warnings that clashed with the comforting facade of her neighbors. Then the lights went out. Darkness enveloped her, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. Panic surged, her breath quickening as she fumbled for her phone. Complete silence. No beeping registers. No rustle of bags. Just the sound of her ragged breaths echoing back at her in the absolute void. "Hello?" she called softly, though her voice quaked. Her eyes strained against the dark, searching for movement, for a glimpse of anything. The silence thickened, pressing heavily against her chest. A shiver clawed up her spine as she sensed a presence, something just beyond her reach, shifting, hovering too close. Suddenly, a voice resonated from nowhere and everywhere, cold and laden with ancient malice. "Help us!" The floor trembled beneath her, and a terrible dread surged through her veins. Her heart raced, pounding like a war drum. She had to get to her kids. They were home alone, and fear gripped her like a vice. She burst through the front door, vision blurred, adrenaline coursing through her. The suburban streets, usually so calm, crawled with shadows, whispering promises of danger just out of sight. The darkness was alive, teasing her sanity, as images of her neighbors floated back to her, smiling faces she had trusted, threading stories of the past into her present. Had they lied about the curse of the cave? What kind of history rotted beneath her town? Were her children safe from the frightening connection that loomed over them? The shadows seemed to twist at her heels, a relentless plague of doubt. The real terror was just beginning. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As sinew-taut tension gripped her intention, shadows danced and shifted, echoing concerns into her mind. Her heartbeat matched the cadence of his footsteps behind her. Were they hers alone or swathed with whispers from the cave? Desperation laced every step, and with each breath, the question loomed: when she finally confronted the descendants of secrets buried beneath, would she have the strength to shield her family from the shadows that could swallow them whole? The wind howled, carrying a shiver through the trees lining the street. They twisted and shrieked, as if trying to warn her of the encroaching darkness. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs. Each footfall sent ripples of unease quaking up her spine. The warmth of the streetlights felt feeble against the thick, oppressive gloom that coiled at the edges of her vision. As she neared her home, she glanced nervously over her shoulder, half expecting to see the man from the store trailing her, his gaze burning into her back. Yet, the street lay empty, as still and silent as a tomb. Was it just her imagination, or did she feel the walls of the town closing in? The fear was a living thing, throbbing and pulsating. "Just get home," she muttered under her breath, as if the act of saying it would make it true. The porch light flickered, casting shadows that wobbled unnaturally, dancing in sync with the now familiar whispers that echoed in her mind. With trembling hands, she unlocked the front door, rushing inside, slamming it behind her. The lock clicked into place with a sound that should have offered reassurance but instead felt like a prison cell slamming shut. "Mom?" A small voice broke the silence, filled with sleepy confusion. Sarah's anxiety dampened momentarily at the sound of her daughter, Emily. She rushed to the living room, relief flooding through her. "I'm here, sweetie. You're okay?" "Yeah, but Daniel said he heard something." "Something scary." The flicker of doubt danced again in Sarah's mind, gnawing at her resistances. Daniel. The boy with the curious mind and the propensity to dream of monsters in dark places, like those told of in their town's history. "Just the wind, sweetheart." "Just the wind," she replied, trying to sound steady, even as fear twisted in her gut. Yet, her voice was brittle, snapping under the weight of what lingered outside. "Mama," Emily's voice quivered, the innocence of youth unwrapped in fear. "Can we sleep in your room tonight?" Before Sarah could respond, Daniel dashed in, wild-eyed and pale with fright. "Mom! I saw something outside the window." "Something?" Her heartbeat quickened again, pounding wildly. It looked like a shadow but, it had eyes. They glowed. He shivered, clenching his fists. "Enough," she snapped, but even as the word tumbled from her lips, panic radiated within her. She had to keep them calm, keep them safe. Those strange stories shook her once more, twisting into grotesque shapes that loomed in her mind. The townsfolk and their knowing glances. That disappeared. What had been beneath them wasn't merely folklore, it was a deep, dark secret. There were warnings, and now there were shadows. "Let us stay in my room together," Sarah said, voice barely above a whisper, her maternal instincts kicking in. Protection was all that mattered. Carrying both children, they settled onto the bed, each heart beating like a war drum, each breath a battle against the madness building outside. They huddled together under the thin sheets, eyes wide in the dim light, each trying to piece together the impossible. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from outside, like the splintering of wood. Her breath caught in her throat, reality blurring at the edges. Then quiet returned, but the silence screamed. "I want to turn on the TV." Daniel exclaimed, breaking the tense stillness. "Stay quiet." Sarah tried to maintain control, but something stirred within her, a primal instinct that told her to keep still, to listen. And just then, a whisper, almost too faint to hear, flitted through the open window. It was coiling like smoke, insidious and low. "Help us," with a chill seeping through her, Sarah shot up from the bed, heart racing. She had to see. What lay outside? What had called? The two children clutched at her in fear. She needed to know. Yet, what if it was too late? Would she find answers, or would the truth prove deadly? Unsure, she turned toward the window. The dark was thick and alive. And then, it shifted just beyond the glass, forming a shape all too familiar. Her breath caught, as a familiar voice called, "Help us." Was it real or merely an echo from the depths? She was on the brink, teetering toward an unimaginable truth. The shadows stirred once more, threatening to swallow her whole. What were they asking for? And would she dare to find out? The darkness beyond the window swirled like a living entity, its depths pulling Sarah closer. She could feel the chill of panic rising, squeezing her throat like a vice. The familiar voice echoed again, "Help us," resonating across her very core. A rush of childhood memories flashed before her, a jumble of laughter and light, but now all that remained was the dreadful whispering from the shadows. "Mom?" Emily's small voice trembled beside her, clinging to the edge of her shirt. Daniel pressed against her leg, his eyes wide, reflecting the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears. "It's okay. I promise I'll keep you safe," she said, but even she didn't believe it. Her instincts flared. There was something wrong outside, and whatever it was wanted her to come closer. How much danger lurked in the shadows? She had to manage her fear, not just for herself but for the children. "Stay here," she whispered sternly, moving towards the window, heart racing. She pulled back the flimsy curtain. The street was a liquid pool of night, heavy and suffocating. In the distance, the dark shape shimmered, its outline barely perceptible. It seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, drawing her in, and against her will, she leaned closer. Please. The voice was now closer, laced with despair, almost begging. Was she losing her mind? Was it the wind? Or was it truly someone or something out there? "Mama." Emily's grip tightened, nails digging into Sarah's skin. Daniel shuffled behind her, torn between curiosity and terror. "I have to see," Sarah breathed, almost to herself. There was a compulsion to know, to understand. But with each step, the gnawing dread grew. What if the shadows had teeth? She hesitated, fingers trembling on the window latch. What if she opened it? What if the thing outside wasn't looking for help at all? The townsfolk had spoken in hushed tones about the darkness taking people, about them never coming back. Suddenly, a loud crash jolted through the air, sending splinters of fear racing down her spine. The glass of a nearby fence shattered, its sound piercing the suffocating silence. The shadows flickered, forming chaotic shapes that seemed to writhe. "Mom! Let us lock the door!" Daniel screamed, his voice laced with panic. Before she could react, the lights flickered violently, then plunged them into darkness. The only sounds were their breaths, rapid and panicked. Then came the whisper again, unmistakable now, beckoning. "Help us, it's close," Emily whimpered. "I know." Sarah's fingers danced over the window, heart pounding louder than the tempest outside. Everything slowed. She felt a surge of negligence. She had a choice. She could teach her children to run, to hide under the cover of ignorance. Yet, deep down, she knew that this was not merely a battle with shadows, it was a confrontation with their past, with the very roots of the town's fear. "What are we supposed to do?" she murmured, more to herself than her children. The shadows flowed again, coiling around the house like serpents, the dark shapes pulling toward the door. But before she could think, a chill rushed through her, clenching like icy fingers around her spine. The whispers increased, rising in a twisted chorus. "Help us, join us." What if she opened the door? What would she find? Answers or a deception that could trap them all? With her heart racing toward despair, she glanced back at her children, who waited wide-eyed on the bed, and that's when she realized fear wasn't just watching them. It was waiting. "What do you want from us?" she shouted into the abyss, but the darkness merely laughed, a sound that curled around her like smoke. "Stay back!" Daniel shouted, thrusting his arms protectively around Emily. The window rattled, and a cold breath swept through the room. Terrified, Sarah felt something out there, pulling at her, demanding to be let in. She had to act, but how? In that critical moment of indecision, the ground beneath them quaked, rumbling with a ferocity that threatened to tear them apart. The shadows surged, and suddenly, the house lights flickered back on, revealing two figures looming just outside, their outlines sickeningly familiar. "Help us," they cried again, but now their faces twisted in agony, a mixture of longing and dread that left Sarah frozen. Her soul screamed for her to slam the window shut, but curiosity had drawn them too close to the edge. And just then, from behind her, Emily said, "Mom, are we going to die?" The truth clawed at Sarah, raw and unfiltered as her gaze fixed back on the figures. And then she realized, in that heartbeat of horror, that the worst was yet to come. What were they truly reaching for? And how far would the shadows go to claim them? The air in the room thickened, suffocating Sarah with dread. The figures outside twisted, their features faintly illuminated by the erratic glow of the house lights. Panic surged within her as she recognized them, but denial fought for dominance. "Mom, don't let them in." Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper, though his fear echoed louder than thunder. But those faces, so hauntingly familiar, belonged to people who had vanished from their town friends, neighbors, even family. A scream lodged in Sarah's throat as she took in their hollow eyes, devoid of life yet full of yearning. She wanted to look away, but her feet felt glued to the floor. "Help us!" The plea dripped with desperation, the way a child called for their mother, laced with overtones of despair and longing. "What do you want?" Sarah finally rasped, her voice shaking. "Join us!" They swayed, their movements eerily synchronized, as if wrapped in an unseen force that threatened to collapse the distance between them. Fear twisted inside Sarah. She knew she should back away. She should shield her children from whatever darkness had overtaken the world outside. But what happened if she turned away? What if they were telling the truth about suffering? "Mom!" Emily grasped her arm, her tiny nails biting into Sarah's skin. "I don't want them to come in. I don't want to see." "Neither do I, baby," Sarah murmured, though her heartbeat quickened in defiance. She was caught between the childlike innocence of her daughter and the dark fate awaiting them. Then, a frantic knocking shattered the delicate tension. Thud. 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 It reverberated through their bones. "Help us, Sarah. Please." The familiar voices cried, mixing with a chorus of whispers that taunted her from the depths of her mind. "No." She shook her head violently. "It's not them," she thought, though doubt gnawed at her insides. It felt wrong. All wrong. This isn't real. Daniel pressed closer to Emily, their faces drenched in terror. The shadows outside shifted, spinning and crouching like beasts waiting to pounce. They clawed at the edges of Sarah's sanity as she wrestled with the anguished plea of the figures. In a fit of desperation, she lunged for the window, yanking it shut with a sharp click. The moment the latch clicked into place, the knocking ceased, replaced by low growls echoing through the shadows. An oppressive silence enveloped the room, pulsating with a sinister calm. "What did we do?" Emily whispered, her eyes moist with tears. "Mom, can they still get in?" Daniel asked, voice trembling. Swallowing her panic, Sarah turned toward her children, desperately trying to exude confidence. "We're safe, for now," she breathed, though doubt clawed at her throat. But just as relief flickered like a dying flame, the lights flickered again. The temperature dropped as whispers of rage filled the small room, a harrowing tone that promised retribution. "Help us, join us," they taunted, now murmuring from inside the walls, the darkness palpable, eager to consume. With each passing second, the sensation of being watched intensified. The walls felt like they were closing in, pressing against Sarah's chest. Each heartbeat echoed trepidation, the sinister draw of the shadows welcoming her into their fold. "Mom!" Emily yelled, pressing her small hands over her ears, but the whispers only grew louder. "Make them stop." Her heart raced as an idea flared. Was there a way to stop this nightmare? "Maybe we can call for help," she said, scrambling to find her phone, but dread pooled in her stomach. The landline had been dead for days, and her cell was uncharged. Fingers trembling, she scanned the room for anything they could use, sensing the growing presence of the dark. The shadows grew bolder, reaching ever closer, their shapes morphing into figures circling the house, seeking entry. Something clawed at her heart, revealing the truth she had been too afraid to fathom. "Emily, Daniel, listen to me," she lowered her voice to a hush. "We have to leave the house." But the urgency of her words seemed ineffective against the growing chaos outside. Panic blossomed like a dark flower, threatening to drown them all. "We can't," Daniel cried, face pale. "No. They're waiting for us," Emily sobbed. A crash rang out, a door slamming against a wall. Sarah's heart stopped. They were getting in. "We have to go now," she shouted, summoning every ounce of courage. But as they turned toward the door, the shadows descended, enveloping the room in a living darkness, swallowing hope whole. The room trembled as the force pushed against them, and with that, Sarah understood the last ember of terror. To face the shadows or to surrender to them, what lurked beyond the door was now a certainty, and whatever dark truth awaited them outside would either destroy them or reveal an unexpected horror. Would they escape, or would the night claim them, ushering the darkness into their very souls? The walls trembled with a force that shook Sarah's very core. Panic clawed at her throat, tightening like a noose. Shadows writhed hungrily, creeping closer despite her desperate attempts to shield her children from the encroaching doom. The whispers had become a deafening choir, swirling around them, demanding attention and compliance. "Don't lose hope," she pleaded, grabbing Daniel's hand tightly as if the physical contact could anchor them. "We can still get out of here." "Where?" His voice cracked, and Emily pressed her face against her mother's side, her small frame trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. Sarah glanced at the door, its wood warped and twisted, an ominous frame that seemed to breathe. It was like looking into a dark abyss, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting with bated breath, mere moments from breaking through. "Back door. We can try the back door," she blurted. "We just need to get out." But as she turned, the dark room felt like it was pulling at her, a dense fog threatening to swallow her whole. Each step was a struggle against the unseen weight of malevolent eyes, watching, waiting. Mom Emily's voice was small and frightened. "What if we can't?" "We will," Sarah declared, fighting to retain her composure, but doubt loomed large behind her heart. She steeled herself to face whatever lay beyond their fragile sanctuary. "We have to stick together, okay?" The kids nodded, their faces pale and wide-eyed. Together, they shuffled toward the back of the house, shadows stretching across the floor like wraiths hungry for warmth. Sarah felt the unease curl in her stomach, a knot of horror that threatened to unravel her resolve. Every click of their shoes echoed like a shout in the oppressive silence. They reached the kitchen, where moonlight flickered through a grimy window. Sarah felt for the doorknob, her hand trembling as icy fingers crept up her spine. "On the count of 3, we run," she whispered, glancing back at the swirling darkness. It hadn't shifted, it was still there, waiting for their moment of hesitation. 1, 2. The kitchen door was old and groaned in protest as she turned the knob. It took all her strength to pull it open, and when it did, the cold air that rushed in was not a welcome relief, it was a raw breath from the grave. 3. She shouted, her voice ripping through the stillness. They burst out of the house, the night swallowing them whole. They stumbled onto the porch, but the darkness had not abandoned them. The trees around the house seemed to lean in, their branches outstretched like skeletal hands, as if trying to grasp at their souls. A looming presence hovered just at the edge of the lamplight, shrouded in shadows that buckled under the weight of unmistakable dread. "What is that?" Daniel gasped, pointing toward the thicket. As they turned to look, a figure emerged, its silhouette sharp against the darkness. It was a face they all knew too well. The weight of recognition hit them in waves of horror. "Sarah, help us!" The figure wailed, its voice a macabre melody that laced her name with anguish. "No!" Sarah screamed, instinctively pulling her children closer. "Don't listen. It's a trick." But the words came too late. The air shimmered with palpable fear. As the figure stepped closer, more emerged behind it, faces twisted in a grimace of longing, mouths moving in unison, pleading voices clawing at her sanity. She felt her heart racing, pounding in her ears like a war drum. "Join us," they chorused, a haunting echo that seemed to pull at the very fibers of her being. In that moment, terror surged through Sarah. What they had fled had followed them, and it was here, alive and hungry. "Run!" she cried, grabbing both children by the hand, yanking them into a mad sprint down the path that twisted through the trees, the shadows behind them shifting and twisting, whispering promises of despair. As they ran deeper into the night, the whispers grew louder, penetrating their resolve, wrapping around them like an inescapable web. Each step felt heavier, every fleeting shadow hauntingly familiar. But just as Sarah felt they might escape, she heard a chilling sound, a soft chuckle, swirling around them, laced with an eerie familiarity. It echoed from every direction, a cacophony of laughter that dripped with malice, striking at the heart of her fear. "Don't let them catch you," whispered a disembodied voice, resonating deep within her, chilling her to the bone. What had she awakened? And could they truly escape the encroaching shadows, or would the night consume them, binding their souls to the darkness forever? The trees closed in around them, and Sarah's breath caught. She realized, with cold dread, that they might not be the only ones on the run. What if the whispers there spoke not just of the past but of what was yet to come? The moon hung low, a pale sentinel in the starless sky, casting ghostly fingers through the canopy above. Each rustle of leaves was a reminder of how close they were to the despair that lingered in the shadows. Sweat trickled down Sarah's back as they stumbled blindly, away from the house, the imprints of terror still fresh in her mind. "Mom, I can't keep running," Daniel gasped, dragging his feet through the thick underbrush. The chill of night wrapped tightly around them, squeezing the breath from his lungs. "Just a little longer," Sarah urged, her heart pounding as dread clawed at her insides. She shot a glance over her shoulder, half expecting to see those familiar yet twisted faces emerging from the darkness. The laughter lingered, mocking her, wrapping around her mind like barbed wire. Emboldened by a sudden surge of desperation, she tightened her grip on Daniel's hand and pulled them into a narrow path that led deeper into the woods. "Stay close, don't let go." Emily tripped and fell on the cold earth, her knees hitting the ground with a sickening thud. "Mom, I can't," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks, reflecting the pale light. "Get up. We have to go." Sarah's voice cracked, blending urgency with panic. But just as Emily reached for her, the whispering shadows clawed closer, singing sinister lullabies. Sarah's heart sank at the sound, like shards of glass slowly piercing flesh. In a burst of adrenaline, she yanked Emily up and kept moving, driven by pure instinct, survival at any cost. The silhouettes behind them danced and twirled in her peripheral vision, a grotesque performance that gnawed at her sanity. "Turn back," the chorus called, their voices dripping with malice. "We are waiting," but there was no turning back now. They pushed deeper, the trees looming overhead like towering giants, their branches intertwining and creating a web that trapped them. Fog began to seep through the underbrush, wrapping around their legs like the cold arms of the dead. "Please, Mom," Daniel whimpered, his voice trembling with terror. "I know, baby, I know." She shot back, her voice a mixture of resolve and dread. "Just hold on." And then, something flashed in the distance. A warm golden glow flickered through the thick trees, like a small beacon calling them with promises of safety. "Over there!" Sarah cried, half pulling, half dragging her children toward the light. But as they approached, that light ominously flickered, struggling against the weight of the shadows around it, growing less inviting with every step. A sudden gust swept through the area, cascading leaves into a whirlpool of chaos. The light dimmed, casting elongated shadows that swallowed their hope whole. "Keep going," she urged. One foot in front of the other, the laughter intensified, a cacophony that surrounded them, not just in their minds, not just their own fear, but a mockery from beyond. Whispers turned into shouts, resonating through the air, bouncing off trees like thunder. "Join us," they cried, clawing at her will. Suddenly, Daniel stopped dead in his tracks. "Mom, look!" She turned to see two shadowy figures standing just beyond the reach of the flickering light, their features grotesquely familiar. Were they choosing this moment to emerge, or had they been lurking in the periphery, hidden within the fabric of their fear? Sarah, one of them, reached out, voice dripping with an uncanny sweetness, so reminiscent of distant lullabies. "Join us, we've missed you know. Get back." Sarah screamed, instinctively pushing her children behind her. The fear coursed like fire through her veins as she took a tentative step backward, her instincts urging her to flee, but the light flared briefly, spotlighting their forms. It was all too real. Then it flickered out, shadows consuming it once more. In that horrifying instant, she realized they were not just running from the past, they were stumbling blindly into it. Were those lost souls forever trapped, or were they still prey to something worse, nursing their own terrible despair at the expense of others? As panic gripped her heart, she gritted her teeth and yelled, "Run!" But as they turned to flee, the ground gave way beneath them, a dark chasm opening up like the hungry maw of hell itself. The call of the shadows behind them surged, almost solid now, and Sarah knew the chase was far from over. The fight had now become a fight for their souls. What awaited them at the bottom of that forsaken pit? Would they descend into hell to find the truth, or would it consume them entirely? The fall felt endless. Each second stretched into eternity as Sarah grasped her children tightly. They crashed into the darkness below, thud after thud. A strange silence enveloped them, swallowing the echoes of terror. Sarah's heart raced in her chest. She blinked, trying to adjust to the dimness. Shadows flickered, moved. Breathless, she scanned their surroundings, feeling the chill seep through her skin. The fall had left them disoriented, their minds racing. "Are you guys okay?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel moaned softly, I think I twisted my ankle." "Emily?" Sarah called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here." Emily's voice trembled, shadows dancing across her face. "Mom, I don't like this." A faint glow broke through the obscurity, illuminating a narrow passage that led deeper into the bowels of the earth. "We need to find a way out," Sarah said, forcing herself to remain calm. "Follow me." They began to crawl toward the light, its warmth offering a fleeting sense of safety. But as they ventured further, the darkness pressed in, clinging like wet cloth. The air grew thick, almost suffocating. "Do you hear that?" Daniel whispered, his eyes wide. The echoes of faint whispers curled around them, insidious and close. They were not alone. "Keep moving," Sarah urged, her heart drumming in her ears. Each step felt like a step deeper into a nightmare. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast cavern, the kind that seemed to stretch into infinity. They halted, staring into the bleak unknown. The glow was stronger here, mingling with an unsettling presence that pricked at her skin. "Mom, what is that?" Emily pointed to a series of symbols carved into the cavern walls. They looked ancient, archaic, twisting horror into their very essence. Sarah approached, curiosity mingling with dread. "They look like warnings," she murmured, tracing a finger over the jagged edges. The moment she touched the wall, a soft rumble vibrated beneath them. "Mom!" Daniel cried, grabbing her arm. "We have to go." "Wait!" But it was too late. Shadows surged forward, filling the space, pooling around their feet. The whispers rose, sharper now, demanding. "Come closer, join us." Fear gripped her heart. "Don't listen. Move." Breaking free of the cave's eerie grip, they dove for an exit on the other side, a darker tunnel that seemed to beckon them like some kind of abyssal maw. As they scrambled through, the shadows hissed, rage echoing in their proximity. The air grew colder, biting into their skin, then, silence. It hovered thick and heavy, a deceptive calm settling around them. Heartbeats thundered in that void, amplifying the fear pulsing through Sarah's veins. "Why did we come here?" Emily whispered, her voice barely a breath. The trembling in her tone told Sarah that her daughter understood the gravity of their situation, but they had no choice but to push on. "Because," Sarah swallowed hard, we have to face whatever this is. Uncertainty gnawed at her. Could they face the dark ciphers from their past? The shadows weren't merely specters, they were pieces of a haunting truth, long buried but still alive. Just the thought nearly sent her crashing into despair. A distant sound broke the oppressive quiet, a low growl. Panic flooded her chest as they turned to face the onyx-black tunnel. Something lingered there, something watching, waiting. What is that? Daniel's voice cracked with fear. I don't know, Sarah admitted, feeling the cold sweat slick her forehead. A figure emerged, unsteady yet drawn toward them, its form flickering like a dying flame. Was it one of the faces from the shadows? Was it a trap or salvation? The soothing whispers returned, wrapping around them, pulling them closer. Join us, become one with us. Eyes wide, Sarah held her children tightly, wishing she could shield them from this nightmare. Don't believe them, she cried out. But fear flared brightly, and the growing shadow threatened to extinguish the last flicker of hope. As they stood on the brink of consuming darkness, the echo of their past howled in fury. The haunting was growing stronger, and the truth of this place threatened to reveal itself in a way they could never comprehend. What awaited them in the shadows? Would they discover secrets that bound their souls, or would the darkness claim them forever? A deafening silence enveloped them again, as if the air itself had been sucked away. Sarah's heart raced uncontrollably. Every instinct warned her to turn back, but there was no path untraveled. No other option. The flickering figure was closer now, and with every passing moment, the shadows surged, coiling around them tighter. Wait! The voice crackled in the dark, sharper now. More defined. A woman stepped forward and the light grew brighter. Her hair tumbled like frail vines, and her eyes glinted with something unfathomable. Was it anguish or madness? Help, she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand, her fingers grasping at the air as if trying to pull them in. You must help me. Who are you? Sarah stammered, bracing herself. She pulled her children closer, adrenaline coursing through her veins in a panic-fueled rush. I was like you. I came here looking for something. Answers, but they took my soul. The woman's voice dripped with despair, her gaze steady but wild. Daniel, Emily, stay back. Sarah shouted, unable to tear her eyes away from the woman. Suddenly, all the whispers swelled into a cacophony, drowning out her thoughts, amplifying her fear. Join us, help us, the shadows echoed the woman's plea, merging into a single menacing chorus. Don't listen. Sarah screamed, but her voice felt lost within the howling void. We need to go. She forced herself to pull her children away, but Emily clutched her mother's arm, her eyes darting to the frantic figure. Mom, she looks hurt. We can help her. Emily, no. Panic twisted Sarah's stomach. The woman's hollow eyes were riveted on her daughter. Please, the woman whispered again, her voice now laced with a wild urgency. If you help me, I can help you escape. There's an exit near the symbols. But you have to act quickly before they awaken. The shadows hissed, seeming to react to the woman's every word, swirling and whispering threats in a language Sarah could almost comprehend. What will happen if we stay? Daniel's voice trembled, uncertainty threading through his tone. They will claim you. The woman's eyes darted from Emily to Sarah, panic now reflecting in her own. Once you see what they truly are, once you understand, there is no turning back. Please. The ground beneath them shuddered, and the flickering light dimmed. An urgent warmth seeped from the cave walls, pulsing as if linked with an invisible heart. Shadows writhed and clawed at their feet, seeking to pull them into the depths. I'm not leaving without my kids. Sarah shouted, her words almost swallowed whole by the dark. Make your choice now. The woman cried, her body trembling more violently than before. The glow intensified briefly, revealing her to be nothing more than an apparition, beauty twisted into despair. You must choose, leave me and survive, or stay and risk losing everything. The decision pressed heavily upon Sarah. The whispers escalated, growing more distinct, becoming a chorus of ragged breaths filled with madness and longing. The shadows lunged closer, the cave trembled, and the air thickened, closing in around them. With a quick look at Emily's pleading face and Daniel's fearfully wide eyes, Sarah felt her resolve shatter just a little. "Mom, the exit." Daniel pointed at a new flicker of light, an opening just within reach, painted by the shadow's movement. "Run!" Sarah shouted, and they bolted toward the faint glow with the woman's desperate pleas echoing behind them, "Don't leave me! Don't leave me!" As they dashed through the tunnel, Sarah's heart raced with every step. The growls turned vicious, snapping at their heels. They were being hunted. What awaited them on the other side of that light? Would they find freedom or eternal entrapment? The shadows behind them clawed desperately, becoming more menacing as Sarah felt fear deepen into panic. But it wasn't just escape they sought. A part of Sarah whispered that staying might unveil dark truths they were not ready to face. The abyss lurked, she felt it, breathing. The flicker grew stronger, but echoes of the past were relentless. And what if leaving also meant abandoning everything they knew? The light beckoned like a false promise, and as they approached, Sarah's heart sank into the depths of a new dread. Would the open doorway lead to salvation, or would it plunge them deeper into the nightmare? The light pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing them closer as dread gnawed at Sarah's insides. She could feel the shadows right behind them, sharp and hungry, their whispers morphing into raspy, mocking laughter. Every pulse of light felt like a countdown, a warning that time was fleeting. "Faster!" she urged, pushing her children ahead. Daniel stumbled, his foot catching on the jagged rocks, but Sarah lunged back to steady him just in time. They were on the verge of falling, yet the shadows pressed ever closer, their threatening forms snaking around the trio, clawing for any exposed flesh. "Mom!" Emily cried out, her voice breaking through the chaos. "What if we can't get out?" "We have to believe we will." Sarah shouted back, more to convince herself than her daughter. Terror coursed through her veins, a primal instinct that screamed they needed to escape. They stumbled into the light, breaking free from the shadow's grasp. The brightness enveloped them, blinding for a moment, but it was a false safety. The tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space, and the air felt heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken horrors. The light flickered again, revealing symbols carved in the stone, the very symbols the woman had mentioned. "What is this place?" Daniel's voice wavered as they stepped into the cavern, and for a moment, Sarah's eyes widened with disbelief. The walls were covered in grotesque images, figures contorted in agony, their faces twisted in silent screams. Each carving seemed alive, leering at them in mockery. A sense of being watched crept into Sarah's mind, as if the stones themselves held the memories of pain, unwilling to let go. "Mom, I don't like this." Emily clutched Sarah's hand tightly, looking around as fear blazed in her innocent eyes. "It's okay, honey," Sarah whispered, but her own heart sank under the weight of this new horror. Then, from the shadows of the cavern, a low, guttural sound reverberated. It was almost dignified in its menace, a growl laced with age-old resentment. The shadows coalesced into forms, dark shapes skittering across the ground. "We need to find the exit," Sarah yelled, scanning the walls for any sign of hope, any sign of escape. But the symbols pulsed, seeming to react to her presence, shifting and morphing into something that could only be described as a warning. A chill crept down her spine when she noticed a structure in the center, a stone altar, slick with moisture and decades of neglect. Something stirred within her memory, something she couldn't quite grasp but felt predominantly wrong. "Run!" she urged, but the cavern was expansive. The figures and shadows circled them, encroaching, and the air thickened with their malice. Their forms shrieked loudly in the absence of true voices, a cacophony of torment. "Mom!" Daniel's voice echoed again, sharp with fear as he stumbled back towards the altar. A jagged shard of light danced above it, drawing eyes like moths to a flame. "The symbols, they're moving." As helplessness threatened to envelop them, Sarah noticed a flicker of hope within the intricate designs and exit just above the altar, half-cloaked in shadow. But would they make it before whatever haunted the cavern took hold? "I'll get you out," she breathed, summoning every ounce of courage. The crushing weight of dread threatened to drown her, but she wouldn't give in. Taking her children's hands, she dashed toward the altar, the shadows boiling around them, shrieking in outrage. "Don't look back," she urged, her heart hammering. As they neared the altar, the lights flickered to life, illuminating terrified faces trapped in the stone. And then everything went black. The terrible roar of rage emerged from the shadows, coupled with the sound of heavy footsteps echoing ominously in the dark. Sarah gasped as the darkness reigned, swallowing her and her children whole. What had they awakened? Was the exit closer, or had they just plunged deeper into the nightmare? The shadows pulsed around them, hungry for a new sacrifice, and she could only hope they weren't too late. A shudder ran through the cave, rattling Sarah's bones. Darkness enveloped around them, thickening as panic clawed at her chest. "Mom! What's happening?" Daniel's voice trembled, filled with terror, while Emily pressed closer, her petite form shaking against Sarah's side. The echoes of the shadows roared like thunder, knitting a taut web of fear that threatened to snare them whole. "We have to keep moving. Hold on to me," Sarah shouted, forcing her heart to calm beneath a desperate facade. The shadows writhed, angry tendrils searching for warmth, for life amid the stone and darkness. "Where do we go?" Emily whimpered, her small hand a fragile connection to hope. "Just follow my voice," Sarah urged, her instincts taking command. She needed to push through, to find that flickering light again. The exit a pathway to escape. Heart pounding like a war drum, she forced them to navigate through swirling darkness. The ground trembled beneath them, sending ripples of fear as they crept forward, guided only by the distant whisper of their hopes. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed, a sound not of their own making but of anguish-wrapped shadows. It clawed at Sarah's heart, urging her forward. "Keep going," she yelled, her voice cutting through the madness around them. They stumbled to the altar, the faint glow beckoning them like a lighthouse in a storm. They could see at the exit above, tantalizingly close. "Mom, please," Daniel pleaded, his voice rising over the pandemonium. Anxiety twisted Sarah's stomach, but in his eyes, she saw determination too. It sparked within her like a fire igniting her relentless spirit. With a final heave, she bolted toward the shadowy entrance above the altar. She had to protect them, to fight for their future, whatever lay beyond. "Together!" she cried, pulling her children forward as the shadows surged. They clawed at her ankles, desperate. "No! You can't take them!" Her voice was a roar against the wails of sorrow around them. She willed herself to ascend, channeling her strength into each rapid footfall. The symbols glowed, almost alive, illuminating the darkness with a fierce light as though responding to her cries. "Sarah!" A familiar voice rang across the cavern, its tone reminiscent of a long-forgotten whisper. The presence was unmistakable, trapped souls reaching through the void, hands extended in longing. "Join us, lighten your burden," they chorused again, their hollow faces twisted in yearning, a grotesque reflection pulling at the corners of her mind. "No! You're wrong." She shook her head, the weight of their talons trying to drag her back into darkness choking her resolve. "You are not my family. I belong to my kids." With every ounce of love she had, Sarah pushed forward, defiance burning in her chest. The pulsing to light grew brighter, and finally, she managed to grasp the ledge, pulling herself and her children up. "Almost there, hold tight." She reached for Daniel, yanking him up. He struggled, fear battling with the instinct to cling to her. "Mom!" "The shadows!" he cried, terror painting his pale face. "Just a little more." And just like that, with enough strength and will, she hoisted herself up, followed quickly by Daniel and Emily, bursting into the light. For a moment, silence fell, like the world had stopped. They found themselves standing at the mouth of the cave, light breaking like dawn across their faces, as the shadows receded, writhing in rage behind them. The cave let out a mournful wail, like a soul mourning their lost grip on their lingering forms. But, Mom Daniel's voice quivered, still staring into the mouth of darkness. "Listen," she urged, and as they turned to face each other, the pulsing whispers of the shadows hissed back, retreating into the night and choking on their own agony. The tangled history began to disintegrate, with echoing cries of those lost dimming in the surrender to the light that in that moment, Sarah understood. Those whispers had always been threats. They were the burden of the haunted. The dark figures they were remnants of pain, glorifying the need to survive in desperation. The memories of the town would fade, misfortunes swallowed whole, and the shadows that held the stories of their past could no longer bind them. "Let us go home," Sarah said, taking a deep breath filled with relief, a wave of warmth flowing through her. Daniel and Emily nodded, eyes brightening as they looked back at the cave, then up toward the starlit sky, wide open with endless possibilities. As they walked back toward their home, hand in hand, the darkness faded behind them, whisked away like smoke dissipating under the bright light of dawn. They were free, and for the first time in days, Sarah felt hope bubble within her heart. They had escaped the depths of darkness. Her kids were safe, and together they would heal. Now, before you disappear into the shadows of everyday life, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now, it feeds the algorithm, and really helps me out more than you know. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. I want to hear your thoughts. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support keeps the stories coming, so let us keep this community alive.